as mentioned, I'm going to discuss a little bit the predation strategies of pseudoscorpions. So first, I'm going to depict a little bit of how the pseudoscorpions behave in overall, and then I'll discuss a case involving the species that I studied during my master's. So the pseudoscorpions, of course, are an order of small and usually solitary arachnids, and they are considerably diverse. We have different shapes and forms of these organisms. They are widespread across the world. We can find them in every continent. We have almost 4,000 species described within 26 families. Pseudoscorpions in many kinds of habitats and places, such as litter, tree litter. They can live on plants, underneath the tree barks, underneath these structures of the plants. They can even live in some extreme conditions. We can find species in Alaska in very different places. Despite the fact that the number of studies involving pseudoscorpions has been increasing over time, I have to mention that the number of studies that study the most basic aspects, the most biological aspects, basic aspects of the pseudoscorpions are extremely rare. They are completely overlooked organisms. So, and that's not different for the predatory behavior of these organisms. For pretty much every organisms, or every predator, they have first to detect their prey, then they have to attack it, and they have find ways to feed it, and that's not different for the pseudoscorpions. The thing is, how they detect their prey is probably related to this hair, the trichobotria around their bodies. So here you can see these structures, and they are, as Yuri mentioned, I think these are mechanoreceptors. So presumably the pseudoscorpions rely on vibration stimuli, vibration cues to detect prey and predators and to sense the environment around them. But of course, there's not many studies describing that, and this is actually not known for these organisms. But in fact, we can observe that around their chelae, we have a higher density of this hair. So they pretty much use the chelae to sense the environment around them and to find their prey. They probably don't rely very much on their vision to detect their prey, probably because most species live in dark places, caves and places with not many lights available. So even though they can have two pairs of eyes, so of course there's no studies, at least that I know, showing that as well. Speaking of the pedipalps, this is the main weapon of the pseudoscorpions, similar to the scorpions. So at the end of the pedipalps, we have the chelae, or the claw, with a movable finger in which they use to grasp and hold their prey, usually by their legs or antenna. So for the pseudoscorpions, we also have considerable variety in shapes and forms and colors of the pedipalps and chelae, even within the same genus. Furthermore, for the pseudoscorpions from the suborder called Locairata, they also have a venom gland in which they use to inject it, a venom into the prey. Of course, there's not many studies describing the composition of this venom, but here is an example of a study species in which the researchers found some of the compounds of this venom. And in this case, we can see the red bar here, that is, the composition is mainly of enzymes. So it is hypothesized that the venom also helps to start the digestion process of the pseudoscorpions, at least for this species. And but there's another study that I know that the composition of the venom can compounds of neurotoxins, in which it can paralyze the prey, for instance, and ease the predation process. So most pseudoscorpions are ambush predators, so they don't rely very much on running around the prey and trying to chase it. They are usually remain silent in a place and wait for an unaware prey to approach, and then they use their chelae to grasp the prey. Of course, some pseudoscorpion species are generalists, others are specialists, but overall they can capture a huge variety of prey items, including spiders and all sorts of arthropods, including ants and beetles. So this is an example of a social species of pseudoscorpion, which is a rare feature for them. But here you can see they live underneath these tree barks, and they keep themselves, most part of their bodies, inside the tree bark, and they use their chelae to sense the environment around, and eventually they can capture a prey, and an unaware prey that approaches them. So they use the chelae to grasp it real fast, a prey. So this is just an example of the same species capturing a huge ant compared to its size. This is a cephalotes ant, and they can use one or both chelae to grasp it. And during this process, they also can use their venom to ease the process of the prey capture, which is something that this species has. So of course, after capturing the prey, the pseudoscorpions use, I'm sorry, I put the circle wrongly here. They can use its chelicera to start to feed and start the extracorporeal digestion, and feed on the dead or a weakened prey. They usually try to insert the chelicera between the joints of the prey. So here is an example of the same species, the same social species, using its chelae to manipulate a weakened prey. And here it is trying to insert its chelae into its leg. And then they can release the enzymes, some enzymes in the saliva, and feed on the prey. Here you can also see below the ant a nymph trying to feed as well, and the ant is actually alive, still alive, which is very common to observe in this species of pseudoscorpion. Now I would like to mention some aspects of this social species, which is the Paratemnoides nidificator. As I mentioned, it's a social species. They form colonies that can have hundreds of individuals or just like a few, like 10 individuals. They are very tiny. They have less, usually 5-6 millimeters long. And I won't talk about about the social features of this species, because Professor Everton will do that in another talk. But they live underneath the tree barks of trees that you can find in the Brazilian Cerrado in southeast Brazil. You can breed them really easily in the laboratory. We just need to take a piece of the tree bark, and then we can fix that onto a petri dish, like in this picture. So, and then we can simply mark or tag each pseudoscorpion. And now we can see what every pseudoscorpion of the colony is doing between the tree bark and the glass, which is very convenient. Another thing that is really cool about these species is that they rely on at least two tactics to capture their prey. First, of course, because they are social species, they can hunt cooperatively, and that really eases the process of prey capture, because these species can capture prey like more than 10 times larger than themselves. So the number of pseudoscorpions attacking the same prey at the same time is really important for them. Another thing that is interesting to mention is that they use the habitat structure. I mean the space between the tree bark and the trunk where they live to trap the prey. So they usually they can grasp a prey, a big prey, and then they trap it underneath it, as you can see in this second picture. So the prey usually becomes hopeless and cannot react to the pseudoscorpions, and that's important because some of the prey are really large and dangerous. We actually hypothesize the importance of this gap between the external tree bark and the internal part of the trunk. So in this figure shows an ideal scenario in which this gap will be good enough for a pseudoscorpion to grasp a prey, and then they pull it and trap it underneath the tree bark. But of course, because nothing in nature is simple, we can observe in different trees or in the same tree different gaps, and sometimes the gap is really small. And when a pseudoscorpion tries to capture a prey, it's not able to pull it down. So the prey becomes partially free, and eventually they can flee from the pseudoscorpion. And of course, in a third scenario, these gaps sometimes can be too big, even for large prey. And then sometimes the pseudoscorpion can grasp a prey and try to pull it to underneath the tree bark, but the prey remains loose, and sometimes the prey can attack the pseudoscorpion and cause some damage. In fact, we observed that in laboratory a few times. So this is a picture of a pseudoscorpion that died after trying to capture a big ant, but he could not trap it underneath the tree bark. So the ant actually chopped out, removed the chelae of the pseudoscorpion, and this pseudoscorpion, this blue one, eventually died. Another thing that is interesting in this picture is that the nymphs, there are 3 nymphs feeding on the dead body of the pseudoscorpion, which is something that is fairly common in this species. So here is a footage of a pseudoscorpion trying to capture an ant. So here you can see that the ant cannot react because they can use the haploid structure as a shield and as a weapon. As it continues to pull it underneath, the ant becomes stuck and it becomes completely hopeless. And of course, this is a artificial colony. In this case, we use carbox to make the colony to control for the gaps between the carbox and the petri dish. But in a real colony, other individuals would join this pseudoscorpion and ease even more the predation process. Another interesting thing that we observed studying the pseudoscorpions, we studied 10 colonies of the pseudoscorpions, pretty much like using the tree barks, marking the individuals, studying them in the petri dish. We observed them and we found here in this graph that the foraging behavior of the pseudoscorpion is not really regular. So we have some individuals that engage in the foraging behavior more often than others. So here we found a correlation between body length and the foraging behavior. So that means that the larger individuals within the same colony, they are more aggressive, they wander around the colony more often, they use the ambush behavior to capture a prey more often. For instance, of course, because of that, they have a higher, we show that they have a higher frequency and probability of capturing a prey. And once they start to hold a prey, the large individuals, they keep holding it for longer periods than the small one. So they are more aggressive, they forage more, and they engage in the predation process for longer periods than the short pseudoscorpions. But surprisingly, we observed that the large individuals, they are observed less often feeding than the short individuals. So here in this left, we show that the individuals that were not observed feeding at least once during the study, they usually have a longer body length than the individuals observed feeding, which is not what we expected, of course. Also, we observed a negative association. It's in a small effect, but it is significant. We observed that the body length is negatively associated with the feeding time. So the larger individuals, they usually spend less time feeding than the small individuals, which is also what we do not expect. That led us to hypothesize that maybe this species of pseudoscorpion has some kind of case. So like ants.
You're going into question time.
Okay, and that's pretty much it. I would just would like to end saying that the pseudoscorpions are an amazing group and we can learn a lot of things with them. So I hope that in the future more researchers would study these organisms a little bit more. So I just would like to thank the Universidade Federal de Uberlândia and the ecology program, the lab group, of course the Professor Everton Tiso Pedroso, which was my co-advisor and the specialist of pseudoscorpions, especially these social species, and my advisor Kleber Del Claro. Thank you for your patience, for being here. Thank you, thanks for the staff for this amazing event, this amazing congress.